I made a video a little while ago, and in this video, I spoke in a very negative, pejorative way about incels, insofar as I was trying to make a point. And I was not aware of this at the time, but then thankfully a very considerate subscriber reached out to me and gave me some feedback on the video and said that they didn't like how I had spoken about particular people on this show, referring to them as misogynistic incels. It took me a while to actually consider this, and I did my research. And on doing my research, I came to this realization, a very odd realization, and I think it's one that isn't really spoken about a lot, because it's assumed that people who are not sexually active, who are celibate, are that out of choice because they're taking time to self-love, to care for themselves, to love themselves, to get their shit in order. And to them, I say, yes, go for it, do it, amazing. But then there's those of us whom, even though we don't necessarily hate any group of people or exactly feel entitled to those people's time, their bodies, their affection, their love, God forbid, we are nonetheless celibate, and it's not out of choice. And so by definition, and looking at the history of the word incel, which was actually first coined by a female blogger who created a rather, at least at face value, wholesome community of women who were involuntarily celibate and could talk about their experiences, about feeling isolated, about feeling lonely, alienated from other individuals, from finding partners. And I think that this original meaning of incel is definitely where I fit. I am celibate, and I have been celibate for years, but it isn't necessarily by choice. And I do feel very lonely about, oh my God, my voice is breaking. It's not because I'm going to cry. I just haven't drank anything all day. It sounds so somber. I'm celibate. If I could, I wouldn't be celibate. But then it makes me also self-reflect. And I think that is an important thing. In this day and age, we just all have expectations of human beings. Not necessarily even high expectations, but specific ones. And we have all of these expectations, very specific and individualistic to us. And we expect or pray that we are going to find one human being who's going to somehow fill at least 90% of those. And the pressure, I think, is also because even though we are not, evolutionarily speaking, monogamous, we are in a social world in which we practice social monogamy, at least in theory. And we place great emphasis on trust, on honesty, on knowing that our partner is our partner. And of course, there are new forms of relationships that people are forming, and I think that that is incredible and amazing. But personally, I do not find it to be sufficient for me. And I think the majority of people are the same in that regard. People have different reasons for being celibate. Mine is because of a very traumatic experience, and since then, I have not been able to even contemplate that prospect or even contemplate desire or feeling desired or any form of, I don't know, Adam and Eve sort of feeling human in that sense. And I think a lot of people have experienced such dramatic sexual trauma that even though it's not a choice of theirs to not be intimate with other human beings, they are, because it's just something that has really stunted them and just really shocked them. And I can definitely relate in that sense. The idea of being intimate with another human being just petrifies me. It really, really does. Even if one hasn't experienced sexual trauma, I think just the absolute vulnerability of it and the expectations of it, expectations that are increasingly being informed by the likes of pornography and by what we see on, I don't know, where else do people go? OnlyFans? These expectations and the expectations of giving and receiving pleasure are so immense, and somehow you're meant to be able to fulfill the sexual desires, the sexual wants of your partner to the T, and them of you. And it's just such an amalgamation of standards and expectations and of what is right and what isn't. And again, we live in a modern society which absolutely, irrespective of what it wants to present itself as, has this really major open secret of sex, in which sex obviously sells everywhere. Children are being turned into sexual objects of desire, regrettably, increasingly more so. You see sex or innuendos of sex everywhere, yet nobody talks about it and nobody talks honestly about it. And it is a very difficult thing to talk about, especially when you sort of see two extremes of people who are just completely anti talking about sex relative to people who are very pro-sex and talk all about it. And then there's sort of, I feel like, a large, very large cohort of society who are just very, I wouldn't say ambivalent, but who are willing to not be prudish about sex, but sort of find that there's, a time and a place for it, and also find that they don't really know how to talk about it because it's such a personal thing. It's difficult to know when it's appropriate or when it's right or when it's going to be right for you to be able to talk about it. And some people just don't want to talk about it at all, and that's fine. It is tricky to know how to actually navigate this world of a sex life or a non-existent sex life when you are somebody who yearns for a connection with someone, but you just can't get there. Regrettably, the very negative connotations associated with being involuntarily celibate sort of create, I guess in a way, stigma, because I haven't until very recently. And actually, thank you to this person who reached out to me, because I would have never thought about this. I always just assume that I was, happy on my own. Well, not happy on my own, but that I chose to be alone and not lonely. But I am lonely and not alone. And that's okay. It is what it is. And it was a very weird moment of self-reflection to realize that actually I am involuntarily celibate. I am an incel. There's obviously reasons and context behind it, which I think anybody who is in that same position or a similar one can relate to, insofar as it being very personal to you. But it isn't that it's anybody else's fault. I think it's also just a conversation that we need to have. And I think it's an important one to have, because increasingly younger people are having less and less sex. People are spending far more time online watching pornography and rarely engaging in virtual intimate relationships. And that isn't the same. It's not to say that it's wrong or that people shouldn't do such things because it's morally reprehensible. I'm not an expert on any of this. I'm not one to talk about it. But I think it would just be nicer to be able to actually come to terms with the fact that sometimes incels aren't just misogynistic men sitting in their mom's basement watching South Park. I mean, I watch South Park, but it's far more nuanced than that, and there's a lot more going on with that. And, relationships and people and human beings are difficult. And I don't even know why I'm making this video, to be quite honest, but I just thought it would be interesting to just share this sort of revelation that, well, not really a revelation. I've known this, I just haven't put words to it. But this sort of, I guess it's like a frustration, but more so a frustration with just, well, myself, but also sort of just with the state of our society, in which it just really is not a society which makes it even realistically possible for people to actually overcome such things. to actually viably overcome these things, because there's just so many, I wouldn't even call them hurdles, but just going into a superstore, just wanting a bottle of ketchup to make your day, and you're just faced with 20 different brands and you have to somehow choose, and it's just so overwhelming that you don't know what to do. It's like seeing ads everywhere. You just see adverts everywhere and you just can't get away from them, and you just sort of want peace, and you just want simplicity. You just want that simple intimacy with someone. You just want to feel whole. You just want to feel like a human being, biologically as well as intellectually, or what have you. I think it was just interesting to sort of think about that, and think about, actually, it's not that I'm an independent woman. It's not that I think men or even women are a waste of my time, or that I'm too good for them. I don't even know what this video is. I just thought about making it. I was thinking of making a more like formal video all about sort of incels and the history of incels and like what it previously meant. So if you would be interested in that, please give this video a thumbs up and let me know in the comment section down below. And yes, if you are involuntarily celibate and you want to share in the comment section, please feel free, in order to make me feel a lot less alone. Because I think that's also a consequence of this, is that we often feel very alone, and that there's something wrong with us, that we are unlovable, that nobody finds us attractive. And realistically, that isn't the case. But I think it definitely does feel like that, and sort of the passage of time seems to reinforce that notion. I think that has definitely been the case for me in the last year. But yeah, let me know what you think. And you know what? Let's reclaim the word incel so that it's a bit more for the people who need it. Let's just say that. And I apologize for using it in a pejorative way in my last video. It was inappropriate and it was wrong. Thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one.